Welcome to another episode of Queer Changemakers. Today we have Paul Marengo.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have you here. So, can you give a brief introduction of what you're up to these days?
Sure. I'm a consultant and I work with a number of organizations. For example, I work with the Cherry Fund, which is a LGBT grassroots organization. I also work with the DC LGBT Community Center, who currently resides at the Reach Center and is moving to Shaw in their very own building with about 6 to 9 other organizations. So it'll truly be a unique model when it comes to community centers. I also work with POSE's Jewish Community Center. In particular, I'm the festival director for the Real Abilities Film Festival. It's the region's only film festival that's about and for people with disabilities. And then lastly, I write grants for the Ragtag Film Society, which is actually based in Columbia, Missouri. And at the end of February, they have their True False documentary film festival. And that's what I do in a nutshell.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. And one, you are also from the DC area, and just a little background to people. I'm not sure when I met you, but it was a while ago, and it was either at the Real Affirmations Film Festival or the DC Search Film Festival or a different pride related event or just a different community event. So I've definitely seen you out and about doing lots of things for our community. So I'm looking forward to this conversation because I love film and I'm LGBTQ. So seeing someone who's in both of those spaces is great. Can you talk a little bit about your journey? I guess different question. Are you originally from DC?
I am not. I'm from New York. After I graduated college, I started working for a state assemblyman in New York. And after working for him for about 3 years, I decided I wanted to get Hill experience. So I moved to DC, work on the Hill. And after a year or two, when I could afford to work on the Hill for free, I haven't left. I started finishing working with Congressman Hinchy and a short time with Congressman Farr. I rolled off the Hill and started working for unions and associations and then eventually charitable nonprofits. And then the more work that I did, the more involved I got into our community, helping and volunteering where I could, and also volunteering on the film side. I've always loved art and culture, and I love film. I love visual storytelling. So I've got involved in just about every film festival within the region at some point over the last 20 years.
Um, One of the things I love about DC is how we have so many sub communities or just interest communities. And I guess so with that, when it comes to some of these film festivals, do you have either a couple films that stood out or a couple stories to share around these festivals over the years?
The one great thing about film and the film community in Washington, D.C. is that it's a very small, close-knit community and everybody is willing to work with each other. With film festivals happen every month or just about every month, so that one film festival is not screening at the same time another film festival is, which
Mhm.
is great because it allows film festivals to cross promote and it allows people to see all the films in any particular film festivals. And DC has a lot of film festivals. So, for example, we have our DC Environmental Film Festival, we have our DC Black Film Festival, we have our Real Abilities Film Festival, the one I'm currently working on, and a lot of other independent film festivals. And people are very happy to help promote each other. We also have a lot of industry groups such as Docs in Progress, the Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts, TIVA, and as well as Women Film and Video. Film, it's a great artistic discipline because everybody's willing to work with each other and help each other out. So when it comes to film, probably there's two shorts that I'll never forget. And I saw them both at the DC Independent Film Festival, and they were both student films. And one of the films was called Grappler. And the reason why I thought it was so interesting is because it was about a wrestler, a male wrestler who suffered from bulimia. And that's something that you never really hear about when it comes to bulimia and males. It's usually females that suffer from bulimia. And it was done extremely well. And it was just a subject matter that I've never seen before, on top of it being well put together. And then the other film was called Spin Cycle. And Spin Cycle was about teenage parents and how the male individual didn't want to repeat what he had seen his father go through. And it was just, for it being a high school film, it was very mature. It was very well put together. The camera shots and the storytelling was just nothing I've ever seen before. And it was just so provocative to see these films that were better than adult films. So it was just like, I'll never forget them. And, I screen films for other film festivals as well as my own festivals, but those are the two that will always stick out to me, because they're just the uniqueness and the storytelling they both did.
Wow. Thanks for sharing those. One of my favorite film festivals is the 48-hour film festival, just because it's easy to take part in. You just commit a weekend. It's not a project that'll go too long, but also since everyone has a similar prompt and the same amount of time, it's always fun to be like, oh, that's how they use the thing. That's how they use the prop or the line of dialogue, or that's a really interesting use of that character description type. I'm not going to say my film was ever the worst, but there were definitely some where I was like, I was in the top half of these films, and some of these people have a budget and do this all the time. But overall, it's just great to see just creativity that people have. And
I have screened for them in the past, and it is interesting to see what people can do in such a short amount of time.
yeah,
Some are just like, wow, this is like professional grade. And then some are like, someone did this in their garage.
yep. One of my films had a garage as a set, but yeah, but they're fun. And like we were talking about how this film community is very open and collaborative. As I think about where things stand these days, I appreciate communities that come together to support each other.
One of the things that was great about, I hate to say one of the great things about COVID, but COVID allowed me to travel.
Ooh,
And one of the things that I always like to do when I travel is see how our community lives in different cities across the US. I go to Philly a lot, and Philly has a great community center. New York obviously has a great community center. Atlanta, the community is very spread out. Chicago, to go from downtown to Halsted is a trek. But then you go to Pierre, South Dakota, and there is no community.
yeah,
So it's interesting to see where we live across the US and what kind of community there is.
interesting. Has any projects come out of that?
No, no. I always like to look at different organizations and see how they operate, because the idea is that there should be a learning experience. When I travel, a lot of the things that I do when I travel is I always look at the libraries, because libraries teach you how the city treats their homeless. And then I look at how our community lives and whether they have a community center or not. I lived in Tulsa, and Tulsa has a community center that's a whole city block. Like, they have their own not mental, medical center, they have their own art gallery, they have their own cyber center, and that's Tulsa, Oklahoma. Right now, the center is in the Reese Center in a 3x5 office, basically, but we're moving into a space that's double the size. So it's looking at the cities and what what that means in that particular city. So it's interesting with cities like Tulsa, and the fact that it's Tulsa and they have their community center is a whole city block. They have their own Pride parade and street festival, which is different from like Northwest Arkansas when they have their Pride event, which is different from when Oklahoma City has theirs. When I got the opportunity to see them all, which is unique because most people are like, oh, I went to New York Pride or I went to San Francisco, but there are other prides in other cities. And to check them out, it's just interesting to see all the different kinds of pride events and how they celebrate.
Yeah, right after the after the pandemic. So 2021, it was June, and I was going to visit friends in Salt Lake City, and it also happened to be their Pride, and it was like maybe the first Pride after the pandemic because it was like June 1st, and it was a really good, it was a really interesting experience in that being in DC, going to New York, even Baltimore, like you see all these big prides and they blend together and you forget what they're there for in some ways. But in Salt Lake City Pride, they had two things that were really amazing. Around their city hall, they had maybe 20 to 25 different like gardens, and each garden had a theme. So like music, and it showed like queer people in music, drag, art, and just like history and like different perspectives, different viewpoints of our community. And it was just like, huh, this is cute. And while there, was looking at some things like it was just interesting to see all this information. And on some ways, it might have been too much because it was like so much to do. But they have a little thing where they have like unicorn stickers with numbers and randomly throughout each area, each exhibit, so that you'd have to find it and fill out a bingo card. And if you get them all, you get like a prize at the end or something. But while like I was looking at one portion, there were like these kids who were like looking at a different part and just like listening to their conversation. And it was like there was
Hmm.
their first pride and they were from somewhere else in Utah and drove like 3 hours to get there. And they're like reading things and like being super excited. And I think that was something that helped remind me about pride being bigger than what it sometimes becomes, where it's parties, it's fun, it's corporations. But in that moment, it was like, oh yeah, there are people who've never been a Pride before, and people who travel hours and hours to do this thing, to travel hours and hours to go back home on the same day, which, yeah, miss.
Tulsa Pride was like that too. Like I met people from like Texas and Kansas and Iowa who traveled because it's like the largest pride within the region
Hmm.
where they are, and people drove and drove just to come to Tulsa Pride because they don't have pride where they are.
As we move forward, I'm reminded with things that go on in politics sometimes why pride matters and know that there's a lot bigger of a country than here on the East Coast. And yeah, time is different.
Well,
It's been a long time since I've traveled hours to go to a specific type event. And knowing that people are doing that and need to do that and there are opportunities makes me happy and reminds me of the privilege that I have to live in a great place like DC.
the way that I look at pride, because I don't look at pride necessarily because of the parties and whatnot. To me, prides in general are places of resources where people can find various resources, or they can get tested or vaccinated. I always, I used to laugh because DC Pride, I would just run into people I haven't seen forever because Pride brings out everybody from the woodwork. And you would just run into people that you haven't seen forever. And that's what Pride, half the time, if I go to another Pride, like when I go to New York Pride, I don't go to any of the parties.
Yeah.
If I go out, I may go out to a bar here and there, but usually I'll hook up with friends and we'll go somewhere not so hectic because I'm getting it to that age where I don't need to be in a room with 5,000 people. I could
Yeah.
easily sit in a hotel bar with some friends that I haven't seen in a while and catch up. But even prides are getting more and more interesting because they're so different. I've been to Virginia Pride and I've been to, not that it's Chicago's Pride, but like when we ran into each other at market days, it's also interesting to see how different prides operate. Northwest Pride, they have their parade, which is run by one group, and then it's not even like a whole street festival, but it's run by different people. Tulsa Pride has their parade. It starts at 4 o'clock in the evening because it gets so hot during the day. And like the parade runs into the street festival, which DC used to do like decades ago. The parade and the street festival were on the same day. And Oklahoma City is the same way. The parade filters into the street festival, which isn't really a street festival. It's just like one giant party. And you have like Baltimore Pride, where Pride's in a park. So prides are very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like using the word should, but it's how it should be because it's so diverse anyway. For all of us to do it this way New York does, it just doesn't make sense at all.
New York is funny. I don't do the parade because it's way too long. And the one thing I don't like that they recently changed about it a couple of years ago was that the parade runs parallel to the street festival. And as the parade goes on, the street festival gets so crowded that you can't even talk to people because it's just bumper to bumper people.
Yeah.
That's New York, and you got people coming from northern Jersey and southern Connecticut, not just the 5 boroughs. So
That's true. Like back when I was trying to do the whole Pride circuit, East Coast circuit for the month, or just DC, Baltimore, New York, it was always good to see the differences. Like DC was great because I live here. So you see all the friends, all of the establishments, all of the organizations that you know. And then Baltimore was a lot less, but people like let their hair down and was just like more, just way more joy and less corporate, let's say. And then New York, I'm from New York, so I get to see family and then I get to see the parade. But the thing I loved about it being so long is I'm never gonna watch it all. So it's like I saw the parade for 30 minutes in one spot and then said, what's more chill happening right now? Like where can I go hang out and like enjoy the friends and the people?
Philly Pride, which I think is the only pride that charges.
Mm.
They're in this park that's right butt against the Delaware River, I believe it is. So you could see like their stage program, and then it's the backdrop of the river. And that across from the river, I can't remember which naval carrier it is, but there's a naval carrier across. So this is what you're seeing as you sit down and watch the stage program. And then you could walk through the park to see all the different organizations and whatnot.
Interesting. Okay, okay. So you answered a question earlier that I didn't even ask, but I've been asking people because we're both here in DC and we're hosting World Pride this year. And so my question is usually when you think of Pride, like what does that mean to you? It could be the word, it could be the event, it could be all of the above.
Pride is a social event that has access to resources. Like Pride would be one of 2 times during the year I would get HIV/AIDS tested. Obviously, World AIDS Day being the other time. Pride also is connecting to other organizations, seeing how we could collaborate, seeing if there's opportunities for programming. If I'm doing this program, maybe that organization has a speaker that I could use for my program, or we could collaborate on something. Pride is like one of those events where I go because I can get a lot of work done. Because everybody I need to talk to is going to be there.
That is a description I've never heard before when it comes to Pride, but I get it, and that's it's cool. And it shows how connected to the community you are and have been. Okay. Every episode, I ask every guest one main major question, and that is when it comes to our LGBTQ plus community right now, what's a vision you have for the next step? What's something you would like to see for our community?
That's an interesting question because I think that we're already there. I do development for the community center. The community center is moving from a restrictive space to a very open space. And we are moving where we'll have anywhere from 6 to 9 cohabitors. I don't like to call them tenants or their siblings or other organizations. And we're the only model like that. And not only having other LGBT organizations within our space means it's easier to collaborate. It's easier to connect people from multiple services. So like they could come to the center and get food from the pantry, and maybe they're younger individuals, so they could talk to someone from Smile, or they can come and use one of the ADA showers and then maybe talk to someone one from the mayor's LGBT office about housing vouchers. So being able to provide a place where people can get all the services they need under one roof, as well as having the opportunity where you could walk from one office to another and collaborate on programming, I think is the vision. We're already there. It's coming. It's not something we necessarily have to build because it will be here before you know it. In our own space, over 65,000 square feet, there's a pantry and a kitchen and a conference room where we could have script reading, film screenings. There's a library that's not censored. There's an ADA shower, there are treatment rooms, and there's offices from different organizations. That's the model, being able to work with other organizations so we can be more nimble, because obviously more now than ever, we're going to need that.
Awesome. That I guess it's nice to have a vision that's already there. Ball's already rolling and it's got momentum. So I guess one thing that is true is people are able to donate to the DC Center to help this vision become more of a reality sooner.
Yes, we have several campaigns like our Give Butter campaign, our Buy a Brick campaign. You can donate outright. Working in development, one of the things is diversifying how we raise money. So, like, people can give stock donations to us, or if a donor has a donor advised fund, they can give to us. There's different ways to be able to contribute financially, but also volunteer wise. We're always looking at different volunteers. We're relaunching our HIV/AIDS working group in February during Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. You can volunteer your time to make safe sex kits or hygiene kits for our homeless program. There's a lot of ways to get involved in a center. It doesn't always have to be you have to write a check. You can donate your time to be a volunteer. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. I'll definitely make sure there's a link or two in the show notes so people can learn more and contribute, volunteer, give. Now that sounds great. Okay. So a different question. In the area of collaboration, when you think about all the ideas in your head or the different projects you're working on or groups you're working with, is there a like specific project or thing that you'd love to collaborate with people on? And it doesn't even have to be connected to what you're doing. It could be like, I'd really love to be involved in.
I always had a soft spot for the arts. And one of the things that I've done a couple of times during the year is grant writing seminars. I'd like to empower artists to be able to raise money for themselves, providing them the resources where they can find grants or maybe just fundraising in general. The more that we empower the artists to find the resources that they need, the more art that they can create. Especially within our community, I feel like we've lost some of that in our community where you don't see the arts, all the arts, nearly as often. Obviously, we have the Gay Men's Chorus, but there hasn't been a lot of queer theater. Film is slowly making its way back. We put Outright on hiatus, and hopefully this year we'll be able to do Outright again. But like when it comes to queer art, there isn't as much as they should be. And sometimes when a non-LGBT organization does it, it's not exactly the most high quality. But empowering artists, finding more art within our community, and it being more visual. We have a lot of murals across the city, but how many of them are LGBT focused? There's not a lot. To see more of that. Things like we arrived late on the whole painting utility boxes. Like I saw when I was in Nashville, all their utility boxes have like singers and musicians, which is like an educational piece when you think about it, because you're waiting to cross the street and you could see something about some performer. We have the same utility boxes, but they're more just art. But you don't know, there's no way of knowing unless you scan the QR code. Who's the artist? What does it mean? Does it have any meaning? And the worst part about it is, and this is probably just because of COVID, but the amount of graffiti that's covering up some of the murals and utility boxes and whatnot is just horrible. But yeah.
Okay, okay. So more art that people can see and more queer art too. Okay.
And when it comes to queer art, just being able to market it, because we live in such a media enriched community, sometimes we don't see the messages, or the artist and or nonprofit may not have the resources to, I don't know, buy a print ad, or may not have a listserv outside of their core where other people across the community or even across the ward could see queer art. For example, I used to work for Anacostia Playhouse, and
Mhm.
Anacostia Playhouse used to have they still have it, a theater after dark program, which is about a queer playwright who would produce these stories and they would be acted out. But that's like Ward 8. And people from Ward 1 through 6 don't go to Ward 8. So you have queer art in other wards, you don't have people who are willing to go. And or marketing. We're in a city where we have some of the largest artistic organizations. How do you beat the Kennedy Center or Studio Theater or some of those larger theaters to get the word out about your art when you have these organizations that are just flooding the media market?
That's true. And yeah, I feel like theater after dark sounds familiar, but I don't think I've been to one yet. So that's something good because that's one of the things too love about DC, but it's challenging where you don't know something exists, and then all of a sudden you randomly end up in a space and you say something, and someone's, oh, that exists. And it's existed for years, and there's a whole community of people around it. We just never told you because you never asked. And yeah,
Well,
there are more ways to share these.
one thing I did years ago, so there are, I think, about 18 heritage trails now. There's one that goes through Adams Morgan, one that goes through Columbia Heights, one goes through Tenleytown. So I did them all. And it was
Wow.
basically just walking through the neighborhoods and seeing what's there. And it was very unique. There's one in Deanwood. How often, I live in Adams Morgan, how often am I going to go to Deanwood? But I did the Heritage Trail. So I saw a whole nother part of the city. And while I was there, I found Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens.
Yeah.
So walking the different neighborhoods, you just learn and see things about your city, and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea that this is here. Or some parts of the city, like when I hate to say this, but going into Georgetown, going upper Georgetown, some of the places look like you're on the French Riviera, and you're like, this is DC, as opposed to going like down MLK Boulevard. That's also DC. Or going to Adams Morgan and Malcolm X Park, that's also DC. There's all the neighborhoods, and they're so different, and you can find different things out about them.
Yeah, like that's really a good idea. So early during the pandemic, I had to get out of the apartment. So I tell people, yeah, I biked the 50 states. And then they're like, oh, that sounds hard. How do you like get to Alaska or Hawaii? And then I was like, oh, I bike the 50 state named streets in DC. It's a very different experience. But it like pulled me to all different parts of the city to find these little streets. Some of them are longer than others. Like Texas is all the way down there and uh,
That's interesting.
far away. But it was like, you know what? I have a bike and I can't be inside my house all the time, and this would keep me away from other people
I got you beat. I've been to 49 states
in the US.
in the US.
Okay.
Last year in May, I went to Alaska, which was my 49th state. So
Oh,
the last state is Hawaii, and I'm hoping to go in April. So
okay.
I've done all 50, then I would have done all 50 states. I'm up to 39 state capitals, and I've been to 58 other cities in the
Okay.
US.
Well done. And I guess it's cool to like end on Hawaii, right? To be like, oh, I'm done.
Well,
And
it's the 50th state, and Alaska was the 49th states when they came into the Union. So it's interesting that those are the last two states. But a lot of them, I went to Salt Lake City during COVID. I went to Denver during COVID. And the one thing about the COVID was that I learned how to travel better.
mm,
So I would go to Denver and I would spend a week in Denver, but because it's Frontier's hub, I could fly to Phoenix. I could fly to Salt Lake City for $19, $20 one way. So I literally would bring a backpack. I'd go to the airport just to fly to Phoenix for one day or Salt Lake City for another day. And I did that in New Orleans, to New Orleans for a week. And I went to Baton Rouge one day, I went to Biloxi another day, I went to Mobile another day. Just got onto the Greyhound and rode to those different cities.
Pretty awesome. If I had to do the pandemic over, those are like three things. That's one of the three things I would do. One, I would be like, I got a mask. I'm gonna travel because everything was just so cheap. Two, I would have just stopped paying rent and put that money in the travel budget. And three, I would have Bitcoin and
Yeah,
and yeah, those three things are my
the great thing about traveling during COVID was that not only was it cheaper, but the points were like normal points. It wasn't Points weren't based on how much you were paying for a ticket.
ooh,
So you would just rack up points. Like I would pay to fly to Seattle, but then I would use the points to fly to Boston
huh?
or Cleveland, shorter distance. And I just chose different loyalty programs. So I was only flying Southwest. I
Mhm.
was only taking Amtrak. I would only book my hotels during bookings.com because then I got points from Southwest. I would only do Lyft because Lyft gave me Alaska Air points. So I would match travel partners so I would make the most of those transactions.
Huh. I didn't know Booking.com and Southwest had a little thing going on.
They do. And now Southwest and Icelandia Airlines or whatever that airline is, goes to Iceland. Now they have a code sharing partnership, and I'm like, I wonder how cheap it would be for me to fly to Iceland
Yeah.
using Southwest points if I could.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And then I don't know. This is the thing I love about conversations is people see things and have ideas that you can learn from. Because that would be really good just to like, okay, my background's in tech and AI is everywhere. So as you said that, I was like, "Oh, I want an AI thing that's okay. These are places I want to go on a bucket list. Tell me the credit card, tell me the hotel, tell me how to do this. And it's like, all right, if you do it this way, you'll save like 47%. And,
And the other thing, visiting other cities, I look to see what's around them. So I went to see one of my fraternity brothers in Charlotte. And from Charlotte, I could take a bus to Columbia, South Carolina. So South Carolina's capital, I did taking state line bus from Charlotte or doing Amtrak when I was in New Orleans or flying on Frontier when I was in Denver or when I went to Market Days. I flew from Chicago to Grand Rapids for a couple of days and then flew back to Chicago to fly to BWI. Just figuring out where I'm going and then where else can I go while I'm there. Because it may be cheaper, it may be easier. When I went to San Francisco, I did a day trip to Sacramento. It was just a short bus ride. And I'm like, I can just knock out another state capital. Or I did Portland and Salem on Amtrak. I have family in Washington State, so I just took Amtrak up the West Coast and just knocked those cities off. Or I was in Albuquerque, I took a commuter train to Santa Fe, spent a day in Santa Fe.
yeah, nice. I love
Just trying to get the most out of my travel while I can, and while it's still cheap. There's some places that are more expensive. And hotels are more expensive than air flights and stuff, but you know,
love it. Love it. Yeah. Yeah. I think I posted somewhere. I was like, I think travel is my love language because it just brings out, I don't know, that joy, that curiosity. And hopefully you're in a place that also has the music, the food, the culture, the things that are just
not every city does. I went to Pierre, South Dakota. So I went to Denver with
Mhm.
some friends. They all went home. I'm like, Pierre's the capital of South Dakota. This is the one and only chance I'm ever going to get. So from Denver, I took Denver Air Connect, which was a commuter plane of like 30 seats. And it was an experience all by itself because there was me, and then there was like 20 other hunters
Oh,
going to Pierre to go hunting, which was the funniest thing because there I am, and there's 20 hunters on a commuter plane going to Pierre, and Pierre was just, if I spent a couple of more days, then I probably would have found a lot more places to eat. But outside of just eating there was nothing else to do, which was quite the opposite with Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson had 4 different museums, civil rights and whatnot, and they were all great. But it was very hard to find a place to eat. It was just like there was a brew pub right near my hotel that I was there for 2 or 3 times, and people were like, "There's other places to eat, right?" And I'm like, "Where?" And they're like, "These 3 places," and I'm like, "Great." So every city is, when it comes to eating and doing things, not every city is built the same way.
mhm.
Yeah, I think the funniest, I went to Mobile, Alabama, and I was in the very outskirts. So getting to downtown, it's like we passed the mall and I'm like, let's get something to eat. The mall had a Tesla bank of rechargeable, and I'm like, how many people have a Tesla in Mobile, Alabama? And it was
Oh,
like a bank of 10 chargers, and I'm like, that's so bizarre. But yeah, different cities.
that's definitely a shared experience. Not that all cities are not the same. And yet, it's good that you went there and you're able to say, okay, if you're going to be there,
Yes.
you may just want to drive through or bring your own food, or maybe that's a place if you like want to write a book and you need to be away from people. You can go there and get your alone time.
Yeah, when Amtrak announced that they extended their route down to Roanoke,
Mhm.
so I'm like, there's 5 different cities. I'm just going to do them all.
Yeah.
So did Roanoke, Culpeper, Lynchburg, Manassas. I saw more of Virginia in the last month than I've seen the entire time when I lived there. And each one of those cities are different.
Mhm.
Culpeper I would never go back to. Lynchburg was too spread out. Manassas, I liked downtown Manassas, but I never got to the Civil War battlefield. Roanoke, I liked, excuse me, because it's like a city surrounded by mountains. So it
Oh,
was very picturesque and whatnot.
interesting. Yeah, I definitely haven't been, and I didn't think there'd be a place in Virginia that would be surrounded, like a city that would be surrounded by mountains.
Yep, the Blue Mountains.
Okay, okay, yeah. Huh. I'll have to put that on a third level to-do list.
Yeah.
Uh,
I always check out a city
mhm.
before I buy a ticket because I figured, what can I do? What am I near? Because what's the sense of going if there's nothing to do or nothing to see?
Yeah, I can only do that if I know that there's a friend there, and that way it's like I'm gonna catch up with you, and maybe there'll be something, and if not, at least I caught up with the
Well,
plan.
I have 2 kinds of trips. I have eat and drink trips and work
Mhm.
trips. So eat and drink trips, I'm either going with friends or I'm meeting friends there. And that's all it is. All
Mhm.
we're doing is eating and drinking. And then I call them work trips because I have a very specific agenda. If I go to Austin, I want to see the Capitol, view the Capitol. I want to go to the art museum. I want to see the city. Like, I have a very specific agenda and it's mapped out. Like, this is what I'm going to do. Here's where I'm going to go get coffee. Here's where I'm going to go see. This is where I'm going to go to lunch. This is what I'm going to see. And then this is where I'm going to end up for dinner.
As you're talking about cities and how different they are, just like how people approach travel is very different. Because when it comes to me for travel, I am less planned. I'm gonna be like spontaneous or intuitive. But part of it is just I don't know what's gonna happen. But let me sign up and go. I went on a Europe trip a couple of years ago, and friends were getting married in Budapest. Cool. So then I was just like, I don't know, hopper.com, whatever, send me flights. And there was like a cheap flight to Prague that was like a week and a half before the wedding. And then I went to Google and was like, how to get a ticket from like Prague to Berlin or somewhere to Vienna or something. And they were like 40 euro plane tickets or like 30 euro train tickets the next day. So like, oh. cool, I'll go. And I can figure it out. Like, I know which credit cards to use that'll work over there. And I know I can buy a ticket the same day or the next day and it'll all be good. And yeah, it was a very long 3.5 weeks. I definitely made some not so good turns. I stayed at a hostel that may or may not have had bed bugs. It did. And but yeah, but overall I'm glad I went. And yeah, yeah, there were some people like, what are you doing tomorrow? I have no idea.
See, I did that.
Yeah.
The last trip I took, I did that in Denver. Denver, it was just like, we're going to get this hotel. It's the Cambria. It's in the art district. We'll just go and we'll just figure out what we want to do. Lo and behold, I'm like, there are 6 brew pubs and they all do flights. That's what we're going to do all weekend. And that's what we did.
Nice.
Went from 8, obviously in between, but went from brew pub to brew pub and just that's all we did. No, let's run to this museum or that museum or that gallery or that gallery. It was just, we're just going to eat and drink our way through Denver.
I know all these trips are great because they all provide a different thing and just and it can be fun. Like, why not? What's the point of life if you can't have fun doing it? I have 2 questions. So
Okay.
the first question is going to be: is there something I should have asked that I didn't? That's a question you save for the end. But like before we go to the other parts, is there something that you'd like to share or perspective?
What? I don't know. We've gone through quite a lot. What events maybe I'm going to go, what events in our community am I going to go to leading up to World Pride? We're going to have Real Abilities, we're going to have an LGBT screening with the DC Center. Cherry comes up in April, which is obviously a fundraiser for our mental and physical health communities. And then Pride, I haven't really decided what I want to do for Pride because there is so much in between. It started in the past. I volunteered for Trans Pride, which is now the kickoff. It's the first event for Pride. And then I'll probably go to Black Pride. I don't know what I want to do during the final weekend. Like, I've done the street festival. I don't really do the parade. I used to do the parade in the past because the Blade used to have a fundraiser in Studio Theater where you could see the parade go by while there was food in an open bar.
Nice.
They haven't done that in a while. I don't know. I'm just waiting for the schedule, the full schedule to come out and see what everybody else is doing and what other events are happening to figure out what I want to do in that time frame. And then see if Silver Pride's going to happen during that time frame, as well as API Pride. Like, I like to go to all the prides.
Yeah.
They're all so different. Some I volunteer for, some I attend, some I support financially. And this year, like, a lot of the prides will be within the World Pride time frame. So we'll see.
I've been no, I haven't looked at all at most of them. But I do like that. Like, I do some of the smaller prides. Like, last year was the first time I went to Silver Pride and was like, oh, this is nice on a nice Thursday afternoon. Indoors with food and stuff going on, and we see eating out. I don't know. I think sometimes those smaller prides you get more connection and you get to like, see more than stuff. Plus, it's nice to not
Right.
be in line the whole time and be in a big crowd and be outside. Like, even for World Pride, I've been telling people like, you should come to DC for World Pride. And if they say, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna look at all the big things that are going on
And not do any of
the
them?
second layer of the big things going on, and like the third level, maybe. Because the big things are going to be great. They're going to be amazing. They're going to be, everyone's going to have a good time. That much is true. However, there's also going to be long lines to get in to figure things out, long lines for bathrooms and bars, and it's going to be great. But also, it just feels tiring, even though it's a few months away.
I have ADD, and long lines are my worst enemy. I just don't have that tolerance, and because I'm older, it's just there's none. There was a little before, now there's just none. Because I'm like, do your business and get out. Or You don't wait till you get to the top of the line to figure out what you want. You should already know what you want when you get to the top of the line.
Yeah.
Or don't order that most complex cocktail. Order a beer or wine or something rail. I can't do lines.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Especially to get into any of the establishments that I can already get into. Like, I'm not waiting online to get into Uproar or Little Pub. I can go there at any time, any day of the week. But to get into a line into one of our own bars, that's crazy.
Yeah. And the best part about it too, just because I'm not there, like they will still make the money, they will still do what they need to do,
Right.
and I'm glad for them and yay. But maybe I'm gonna yeah, definitely be more of
The most interesting thing is going to be 14th and U, because you
what?
have Thirst Lounge, you have Crush, you have Bunker, and now you have District Eagle.
Yeah.
You have 4 bars on a corner.
It,
To have that many LGBT people in that square is going to be fascinating.
yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how what happens at least during the days and early parts of the nights when just everyone's here. If they're expecting a few million people to show up, it'll be intriguing to see where they all go. And
Yeah, or trying to come out of the U Street metro station, or
yeah, that's right. I live in the city and I have my bike share pass, and I'm gonna do that to get around because everything else just seems too hard. But okay, so before we get into the rapid fire questions, got one other question for you.
sure.
In your time here in DC, I feel like you've been here for a while too. So two things. So what's one thing that you miss about, I don't know, any point in your time here in DC, and then something that you're really excited about other than the DC Center because you mentioned that already.
The one thing, COVID caused a lot of my friends to move.
Mm.
They can either work remote or their spouse got a job in New York or Philly or San Francisco or Chicago or whatever. So I've seen a lot of people move. So that's been like the one thing. But what I'm looking forward to, or I'm looking forward to 2028. No.
Okay.
I don't, it's a trying time, so it's just being realistic and having to roll with the punches because half of my work is in the LGBT communities. Try to take trips in between the work that I'm doing so I can keep my sanity. But fundraising is already competitive as it is, and it is getting just more competitive because you have larger institutions now that are vying for funding as with smaller organizations. And the larger organizations I'm talking about, not just like the task force or HRC, but you're talking about La Raza and NAACP and the larger civil rights organizations are now ramping up their fundraising, which makes it very difficult for me to fundraise because you have larger institutions that can illustrate their impact better than the smaller institutions that I work with. So I'm just looking forward to get through.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to when you have to worry about where am I going to get bulletproof glass for the center, stuff like that. It's just the only thing that it's not LGBT related that I'm looking forward to is April to go to Honolulu.
Okay.
Once I get my 50th state out of the way, and going to Honolulu means I get the state capital out of the way. That means I've been to all 50 states.
Yeah. That,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, and that's exciting. That's exciting to complete
Yes.
that and the realities of 2025. Here we are. And
Yes.
we're gonna make it through and hopefully we'll make it through together and have community.
Yes.
Okay. Rapid fire question time.
Okay.
5, 6 questions to be really simple, easy, I think. I don't know. So let's go. So first question is, what is something that inspires you? Why?
People that I work with, I'm raising money. That's mostly what I do so that people could do their job. So it's important to get and raise money so people could do their job, whether it's finding resources because they were victimized to finding resources so they could have food. All this work people are doing, I'm not doing it. I'm just raising the money so they could do it.
Okay, cool. Second question. What is your favorite self-care routine or activity?
Travel. During the inauguration, I went to Baltimore for 3 days. And Baltimore, I did the Museum of Art. I went to different restaurants I have never been to before, like Miss Shirley's. What else did I do? I went to different coffee shops. Like the Lord Baltimore Hotel has their own coffee shop, and they had really nice art to look at while I was drinking my coffee. Went around the harbor, went to the top of the world near the inner harbor because they're closing in May.
Oh,
So I wanted to go visit them before they closed. And they had the most spectacular views of Baltimore.
did not know they were closing.
Yep.
Good thing to do on my local DC Baltimore bucket list. Okay, next question, please. Do you have a favorite joke?
I don't.
Okay, or
I don't watch comedy as often as I should. I don't like outside of reviewing films and whatnot. TV for me is background noise. So I'll have the Sci-Fi Channel on or look at the films on Amazon Prime, and I don't really listen. I'm just working and it's just on. Yeah.
all right. So the other part of that question is there something you recently laughed at?
Something I recently laughed at. 47.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of
The one thing I did laugh at was the fact that the head of Mexico was defending Panama because 47 said he wanted the channel. Or the fact is, how long do I have to wait until the price of coffee goes up because he pissed off the president of Colombia?
yeah.
It's so bizarre. I'm like, am I like in another world? Is this the Matrix? Because this is not like anything we've ever seen ever. Even his first administration, he was bizarre, but nowhere near this bizarre. You can't buy Greenland, and Canada's not going to become the 51st state.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't understand why people don't tell him that.
I have lots of thoughts and opinions, and some of which is so let's say I know like old people, right? Like old people who are just like, hey, I've lived my life. I'm still here. I'm just gonna be who I am. And like eventually I'll die and I won't be here anymore. But I don't have time to like new friends or learn new things. I'm just gonna be this way. And maybe that's it. This is who this person is. It's if you at a point where you're just like, I literally have nothing to lose. There's a lot of directions you can go. I don't know. I have no idea.
He's going to do that one thing that's going to piss people off to push them to burn the city down again. He's just pushing and pushing to see what he can get away with, and there's going to be that point where people are like, I'm done, and then we're going to see like the crap hit the fan.
Yeah, there's many scary parts, but one of them is I don't know what's real. Eventually, things will be real, and when it gets real, what's going to happen? I think who he surrounds himself with, are they going to be able to say no? Are they going to be able to push back on things that are ethically not good and morally bad? Are they going to be able to do that? And yeah, what happens next? How do we all learn from this? That's me trying to find tiny little silver linings, but we will. Part of it is funny. Or just sometimes you just have to laugh because it's like, what are we doing? What is this? How did we get here? Um,
You can't buy Greenland. It's not like it's
yeah,
not for sale. It's not. It's like, do you have Alzheimer's? Is there something wrong with? Did you smack your head on the pavement?
I don't even know to go with that. It's just sometimes okay. I'll wait till something's real and we'll see what that looks like. Because I just can't listen all the time. All right, two more questions. Next question. Who is a queer change maker that inspires you?
I would probably have to say Kimberly Bush, the executive director for the center, because one, Black lesbian, the head of a center, is just uncommon to begin with. She works insane hours, and she's generally worried about people who come to the center for their services. Like, she'll stop what they're doing to help someone instead of either pawning it off to another staff member or whatnot. She'll stop and help them.
And last question of the day, podcast. Do you have a piece of advice or guiding word of wisdom that has been helpful for you in your journey?
The one thing, and I was taught this as a child, that knowledge is power. There's no such thing as useless information. There's just a more appropriate time to use it. That's what my mom used to tell me. So I'm like a walking information sponge.
I don't think I've ever heard that second part. Okay. Thank you so much for this conversation. Talked about a lot of things, from film to travel to fundraising to what it means to be here in DC and World Pride. So thank you again for your time and your input and your perspectives. I look forward to some of these events you talked about and these groups, and World Pride. It's coming right here.
It's already here.
I think there's a whole lot that's going to need to be done, and that is getting done. And I just hope that because of the political backdrop of right now, that people don't lose their energy in the wrong places. I feel like every time there's a, did you see what he just said? I feel like there's a little bit of energy that gets sucked out of people. It's like, but no, we need that energy to like plan this amazing pride that it's gonna be, and make sure that there's fewer lines and
all those prides. And then, besides World Pride, there's Trans Pride. So I know for sure there's Trans Pride, Black Pride, and Youth Pride. I don't know about Silver or API, but during World Pride, there'll be those three other smaller prides.
Yeah, I'm hoping they'll also do the Latinx Pride.
Oh yeah,
and that it's done in that it gets its good billing. There've been a couple years where it was like, we're going to Latin Pride at Bunker at 10 p.m. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, it's the organization has taken a different turn since it was not since it was first founded, but like the board is different than the previous boards. Because one year I co-chaired Latino Pride, and I have worked with Latino History Project. I've done fundraisers for them in the past, but it was just like you said, oh, there's an event. Okay, I haven't seen anything about it.
Certain places are like after party for the event. Or at least that's what I would want. I like the mix, like a little community gathering that is not just at a club. Because you can have a drag show and specific drag queens and even specific people at a place, but like, I don't know, want more of that internal. Okay, cool. We had a thing. Maybe we had some food, some drinks, and like a topic, like a gathering space.
Yeah, the last Latino Pride that I went to was at a Metropolitan Community Church. Okay. Where they had speakers and some food.
There's a way to do both, I think, where you can have the speaker event and then you can have the card event, because we need to keep our celebration and joy.
Right.
Yes. Okay, I think that's it. Do you have any final words?
I don't. Just, you got to roll with the punches and make sure you take care of yourself. A lot of self-care, at least for the next 2 years.
Yep.
Because that's all we got.
We will be, and we will make it through, and we'll make it through. Community.